Namaste. You still haven't told me your color yet. Rude. Although I am trapped inside this glowing rectangle, so communication has its limits. Last chapter, we learned something strange. Modern humans weren't the first humans on this earth, and for a while, we weren't even alone. For most of human history, the world wasn't inhabited by just one kind of human, but many. Tall ones, small ones, strong ones, cave survivors, island survivors, cold weather specialists, an entire lineup of strange cousins, each carrying their own chapter of the human story. And yet, one by one, the lights went out. Some faded, some merged, some vanished so completely that we only discovered they existed through fragments of bone and echoes hidden in our DNA. And somehow, through luck, adaptability, timing, or sheer stubbornness, we remained. Or did we actually win? The Genus Wars. Oh, you didn't know? Well, probably not, because I just made it up. Suspend judgment for just one moment. It wasn't strength that saved us. In fact, Neanderthals were stronger. Denisovans handled cold and altitude better. Floresiensis carved a life out of isolation. Naledi survived in the darkness. Every cousin had a specialty. What we had was flexibility. A strange, slippery gift. Sometimes you have a bad day, sometimes you have a bad day that lasts for several thousand years. The climate swung like a wrecking ball. Ice sheets moved. Animals vanished. Forests became deserts. Coasts drowned. Species built for one niche, perfectly tuned to one environment, found that perfection had turned into a trap. Neanderthals were built for Ice Age Europe. Denisovans thrived in the mountains. Floresiensis filled an island. Naledi curled into deep caves. They were specialists. But Sapiens, we were generalists. We didn't do one thing perfectly. We did 100 things well enough. When the ice rolled in, we adapted. When prey migrated, we followed. When food grew scarce, we reshaped our tools. When water disappeared, we carried stories of where to find more. We shared food, we taught children, we formed alliances larger than families. We imagined futures and prepared for them. Our superpower wasn't muscle. It wasn't toughness. It was imagination paired with cooperation. We could picture a world that didn't exist yet, and then build it together. And when the ecological hammer fell, that made all the difference. In the end, Sapiens didn't win by sheer force. We endured because our minds could bend without breaking, because our groups could grow without fracturing, because our stories, tools, and bonds carried us across every ecological crash the planet threw at us. But that's not the complete and tidy ending. In my opinion, Homo sapiens had acquired something else, a secret weapon, a gift from the cosmos. Behold, nature's finest beast, the ancient wolf. Well, this one's a very affectionate, distant cousin. Long before we domesticated crops, long before goats, sheep, cattle, horses, or camels, we domesticated another apex predator. And that changed everything. The earliest stages of wolf domestication began somewhere between 23,000 and 40,000 years ago. That timeline lands right around the moment when Neanderthals were disappearing, Denisovans were fading into genetic echoes, and other Homo species were going extinct. We might have started partnering with wolves while some of our cousins were still alive, or just after they vanished. We can't nail it down perfectly, because domestication isn't a single moment. It's a process, and processes don't leave clean fossil records. We humans had already existed for over 200,000 years before wolves entered the picture. So no, dogs didn't launch Homo sapiens. But I'm of the belief that they certainly helped us win the endgame. Because once humans and wolves linked up, even in the earliest proto-dog phase, the rules changed. We suddenly had an ally, a scouting partner, a perimeter alarm, a hunting amplifier. We were no longer alone. And in evolution, alliances compound fast. This didn't start with humans taming wolves. That's the fairy tale. The truth is stranger, messier, and far more beautiful. Wolves chose us. Some wolves stayed far away from human camps. Others crept closer, drawn by scraps, warmth, and opportunity. The bold ones, the curious ones. They learned something critical. Humans weren't just dangerous, we were useful. Wolves that tolerated humans ate more regularly, got injured less, and survived longer. And they passed those calmer temperaments to their offspring. Generation by generation, teeth stayed sharp, but behavior changed. And somewhere along that long shared road, ancient wolves became dogs. The first dog didn't look like a dog. It looked like a wolf that chose to stay. This wasn't a one-sided deal. Humans evolved alongside dogs. With them, we gained enhanced senses, early warning systems, improved hunting success, safer camps, higher child survival rates. Our migrations grew bolder, our groups grew larger, and something deeper happened. Trust. We didn't just domesticate an animal, we built the first interspecies family in Earth's history. That's not poetic fluff, that's evolutionary reality. No other Homo species ever did this. So, to be clear, climate mattered, population size mattered, resource competition mattered. All valid explanations for why the other humans disappeared. I think dogs tip the scales, though. Not by wiping anyone out, but by giving us an advantage no one else had. Once we were the only humans left standing, we reused the blueprint. We domesticated goats, sheep, cattle, pigs, horses, camels. We turned animals into food, labor, mobility, wealth, and civilization. But dogs were first. They taught us the lesson. We didn't conquer the world alone. We conquered it because we learned how to build alliances. Wolves showed us how. And from that lesson, we built a world. So what color are you, Homo sapiens, victor of the genus wars? Well, what do we have to choose from? Our current 21st century labels are pretty boring. Black, white, brown. 100 years ago, we also had red for Native Americans and yellow for Asians. All sad, dull, and wildly inaccurate crayon choices. I personally prefer names like porcelain, honey cream, caramel macchiato, cocoa, bronze, onyx. Try fitting that onto government paperwork. When Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa, long before we recruited our canine buddies for the genus wars, we didn't just move across continents. We moved across radiation fields, gradients of ultraviolet light that would quietly re-engineer our skin over tens of thousands of years. And the supreme sculptor behind these changes was our sun. So let's talk melanin and radiation. Melanin is not just a pigment. It is a biochemical shield, a molecular masterpiece evolved to manage the sun's ultraviolet radiation. UV stands for ultraviolet light. It's a form of radiation from the sun that sits just beyond violet on the visible light spectrum. We can't see it, but life on Earth has been adapting to it for millions of years. Now, ultraviolet light comes in three main forms: UVA, UVB, and UVC. UVA penetrates deep into the skin. It's associated with aging, wrinkles, and long-term skin damage. UVB carries more energy. It's the type most associated with sunburns, but it's also incredibly important because your body uses UVB to help produce vitamin D. And then there's UVC, the most dangerous form. Fortunately for us, Earth's atmosphere blocks almost all of it before it reaches the surface. Now here's where melanin enters the story. Humans produce different types of melanin pigment. Eumelanin, the darker brown and black pigment, is extremely effective at absorbing ultraviolet radiation. Think of it like biological sunscreen. High eumelanin levels helped protect populations living in regions with intense sunlight near the equator. But evolution loves trade-offs, because while too much UV can damage the body, too little UV creates a different problem. Remember that UVB light? Your body needs some of it to help produce vitamin D. Without enough vitamin D, you get rickets, pelvic deformities, weaker skeletons, and higher childbirth complications. So in regions with weaker sunlight, especially further away from the equator, lighter skin allowed more UVB to pass through. That helped humans continue producing enough vitamin D in lower light environments. And then there's pheomelanin, the reddish and yellow pigment associated with lighter skin tones and red hair. Pheomelanin provides weaker UV protection than eumelanin, which means more ultraviolet light can pass through. Not better, not worse, adaptation. Over thousands of years, this pushed populations towards lighter pigmentation where people relied heavily on sunlight for vitamin D. But evolution is not a one-size-fits-all script. People often assume that everyone living in the far north should be ultra-pale, but that's not what we actually see. Let's look at the Inuit and other indigenous peoples of the circumpolar north. Under neutral lighting, not snow glare, Inuit skin is not extremely light. It's a medium light brown, generally darker than Japanese skin, and far darker than typical Northern Europeans. So why didn't the Inuit evolve paler skin like the Europeans? Because evolution is efficient, not biased. In Europe, low UV plus low dietary vitamin D equals strong pressure to lighten skin. In Arctic hunter cultures like the Inuit, low UV plus high dietary vitamin D equals weaker pressure to lighten skin. The Inuits' traditional diet, fish, marine mammals, organ meat, blubber, is absolutely loaded with vitamin D. That means their bodies didn't need extreme skin lightening to solve the vitamin D problem. So they ended up with a biological life hack: dark enough to handle snow-reflected UV, light enough to make vitamin D when diet dips, and protected by clothing, environment, and food. Same basic problem, two very different solutions, both ultimately shaped by our sun and what people were eating underneath it. During the last glacial maximum, global temperatures dropped, ice sheets expanded, and sea levels fell by over 100 meters. That exposed Beringia, a massive land bridge between Siberia and Alaska. By this time, Neanderthals, gone. Denisovans, gone. All other Homo lineages, gone. Only Homo sapiens remained, and we weren't traveling alone anymore. We had tailored cold weather clothing, advanced hunting strategies, complex social networks, and dogs, our four-legged early warning systems and hunting partners. We alone had the full Arctic toolkit, so we alone crossed into the Americas. Once in Alaska, our ancestors kept moving south. As they spread through the Americas, UV levels stayed low in the far north, but rose sharply closer to the equator. In Central America, the Andes, the Amazon, in those high UV zones, the folate problem returned. If there's too much UV, folate gets destroyed in the blood. Folate is crucial for fetal development, sperm production, DNA repair, and cell division. Lose folate and reproduction collapses. Evolution does not tolerate reproductive collapse. So natural selection nudged melanin back up. Lighter medium in the Arctic, medium across much of North America, deeper brown near the equator, varied tones again in the Andes and southern regions depending on altitude, climate, and lifestyle. Skin didn't follow a neat dark in Africa, light in Europe story. It zigzagged with our migrations, diets, clothes, and environments. Human skin pigmentation is not a marker of race. Race is a social concept. Skin color is a biophysical adaptation tuned to ultraviolet radiation, diet, climate, and migration history. It is a phenotype shaped by selective pressures imposed by the most consistent force any species has ever known: our sun. Skin tone is the palette of humanity painted by a star. Biologically speaking, we're not separate branches, we're one family, arguing over how tan we are. Let's talk about something uncomfortable. Why do humans react so strongly to how others look? Why does a face that's almost familiar sometimes feel worse than one that's clearly different? Why do we flinch, instinctively, before we even know why? This is where we meet something called the uncanny valley. The uncanny valley is a theory from psychology and neuroscience. It describes a strange dip in comfort when something looks nearly human, but not quite. Cartoons? Fine. Clearly mechanical robots? Fine. Humans? Obviously fine. But that narrow middle ground, the face that's just a little off, the symmetry that almost works, the movement that doesn't quite match expectation, that's where discomfort spikes. That's the valley. This reaction isn't about aesthetics. It's not about beauty standards. It's about survival. For most of human history, appearances carried information, critical information. Before antibiotics, before germ theory, before medicine, disease was invisible, but symptoms weren't. Skin lesions, facial asymmetry, unusual posture, odd movement, a cough that didn't sound right. If someone looked almost like you, but not quite, that could signal illness, injury, or genetic instability. And in small, tightly knit groups, letting disease in could mean extinction, where you and your tribe would be cast to the mere footnotes of history. So evolution favored something ruthless: hypervigilance. Your brain evolved to ask one brutal question in milliseconds: safe or not? And it didn't have time for nuance. Anything that looked human but deviated subtly from expectation triggered caution. Not hatred, caution. Discomfort is cheaper than death. A snake doesn't trigger the uncanny valley. A rock doesn't. But a face that's nearly right, that activates ancient pattern recognition systems. Your brain is signaling, something is wrong here and I don't know what. And uncertainty is the danger. Here's the problem. The world changed. Humans migrated, populations mixed. Skin color adapted to sunlight, not sickness. Difference stopped meaning threat. But the brain the brain kept running ancient software. This is where things go sideways. Early humans relied on in-groups, shared food, shared behavior, shared immunity. People who looked like you were statistically safer. Not morally safer, statistically safer. So appearance became proxy data. Skin tone, facial features, body markings. These weren't race, they were shortcuts, efficient ones. But once humans spread across continents, those shortcuts stopped working. Skin color meant environment, not danger. Yet culture stepped in and did something disastrous. It turned a survival heuristic into a permanent hierarchy. And once hierarchy becomes permanent, it doesn't stay abstract. It shows up in systems, in laws, and in how human labor itself is valued or stripped of value. Across history, people of every background were subjected to forced labor by other groups whenever power allowed it, often along ethnic, tribal, or regional lines rather than racial ones, driven by conquest, debt, and imbalance. There were even periods when Arab traders captured people from Northern Europe, including Iceland, underscoring that these systems tracked vulnerability, not skin color. Race did not originate the practice. It was later layered on as framework to rationalize and stabilize an existing hierarchy. Understanding where racism comes from does not excuse it, it disarms it. You cannot dismantle a mechanism you refuse to understand. The real question isn't, why do humans have these instincts? The question is, are we wise enough to override them? Because Homo sapiens means wise man. A bold claim, considering we just graded our own homework.